Okay, so I'm going to quickly introduce the round. Please give a round of applause for all my panelists joining the stage. And I'm just going to start from the back. We have Jeremy Keith here, who I've been reading his blog for like forever, and he's always been a hero of the web to me. And so I'm really glad to have him on board. And then we have Nicole Sullivan, who is almost the same to me, and has been doing tremendous work on CSS before. Again, I'm very glad to have her here. And then we have Sarah Salstreck-Meyer, is that how we pronounce it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Who works as a developer at BuzzFeed. This is actually the first time we're meeting at this conference, but again, we had some really good conversations at the speaker dinner, and I'm super glad to have her. And then we have Gina Trapani, who actually is both CTO, is that right?
Director of Engineering.
Director of Engineering of Postlight, but I'm also really interested in her past, because I've been reading the blog she founded for a long time called Lifehacker. And so she has a publishing background, which I'm pretty curious to have in that mix. And then we have Mike Adler, who's working for Etsy. And Etsy in general is quite performance-minded, I've heard. And he would be probably the best person to talk about how to achieve great performance at Etsy. And that sums up the round, and I'm really glad to have you all here. Thank you for joining the panel.
Thanks for having us.
So, I want to jump in the conversation, I guess. I want to start with Jeremy.
Okay.
Because I know that Jeremy has both written critically about AMP, but also publishes his blog in AMP.
Yes.
So he has some interesting thoughts on probably what it means to the web platform. And so why do you publish in AMP?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I guess the best answer is why not? Like, I publish in alternate representations already. So, for example, I have an RSS feed as well as an HTML page, right? So that's an alternate representation. This seems like just one more alternate representation. So yeah, why not? I'll play around with it. And so I published that, but I'm not entirely sure why, because it was kind of like when Natalia was talking earlier about The Guardian, and you compare the speed results of the non-AMP version to the AMP version, and then sometimes the non-AMP version is actually just fine. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why. And I got to admit, it felt like it was a bit of a bait and switch, because when it came along, it was like there was the Facebook, what do they call it, instant articles, Apple News, and then AMP seemed to be like Google's version of those, but the big difference being that you actually host it on your own website, right? It's a URL on your website, unlike Facebook instant articles, unlike Apple News thing. So okay, well, I approve of that. That's good thinking. But then the whole AMP cache thing kind of flips that on its head. It's not actually being hosted on my domain at all.
When it's consumed, that's right, yes.
So it's tricky. When we talk about AMP, I feel like it's probably need to distinguish whether we're talking about the format, the collection of web components, whether we're talking about the script, that turns those things into being basically spans into being something more useful, and then the AMP cache, which it's a whole separate thing.
That's true, actually, and we can talk all about all of these individually.
I just want to say,
yes, go ahead.
You mentioned RSS, right?
Yeah.
So it was 2 minutes. It took 2 minutes.
2 minutes for
Okay,
RSS.
so
We had a bet in the green room.
Yeah. just want to say that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
Never forgive, never forget.
Yeah.
We've seen that comparison come up a few times.
Gina, the real challenge would be to see if you can work Google Wave into the...
You did it. You did it for me. Rest in peace, Wave.
Sorry?
Rest in peace.
Yeah,
Wave.
rest in peace, exactly, yes. Well, all the other products that we miss. Google Reader. But yeah, so yes, you're right. We should separate the AMP cache discussion from the rest of it, because my guess is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, my guess is that each of us agree on the problem, that we have a pretty slow web on mobile today, in most instances. But my guess is that not all of us agree on the same solutions. And so this is interesting to me. Whenever I hear negative feedback with AMP, So first of all, my perspective, I joined AMP, a few months after it was incubated, and I knew Malte from before, so I knew he had a genuine agenda to do good. But I also initially saw it controversially because of things like the AMP cache. But then when I started to learn about all the reasons for why those things exist, some of them actually fairly complex, and so, when I started blogging about them, learning about them in more detail myself, I then basically challenged everyone else who gave the same feedback. Well, what would you come up with as an alternative? And so far, I have not seen a single good idea.
Hang on, we're talking about some of the companies implementing AMP, like Etsy or Pinterest. These big. I'm pretty sure they actually have caching solutions already. Like,
oh, that's
they
true.
Probably don't need Google's help when it comes to setting up a resource quickly.
The question is, how do you validate that Etsy is indeed fast and user-friendly?
I think this is one of those situations.
I mean, you could go with real user measurements, for example.
Real user measurements?
Yeah. Measure how fast it is to see if it's fast.
You also mentioned validate, but from whose perspective? From the perspective of the user, making the choice between clicking on an Etsy page and clicking on some other search result? Or what kind of validation?
So, I mean, so this is the validation for both the user and the platform. So what it means is the platform can be reasonably sure that if they're sending traffic to that AMP page, that it is in fact probably a fast and user-friendly version of that website. That's one level. The other level is actually establishing the AMP lightning bolt as a sign of trust to users. Say, okay, if you click on that result, it's probably going to be fast and user-friendly, and content will not jump around and ads will not jump around. And so I've done the performance drum for a long time as a web developer myself. You might have seen some of my work before.
So is this like oh shoot, it didn't work, so let's have something more restrictive?
Well, to some extent. So I felt that for the couple of years I did performance outreach, I felt that I was preaching to the choir, because web developers, I never had to convince a web developer that performance matters. Really didn't. It's usually the people higher up who you have to convince, in my opinion. What do you think?
I struggle with that, though, as I've started to get more involved in product decisions and not just completely engineering focused. I've realized that we're all trying to make decisions about what's the best thing to do with imperfect information. And so, I mean, you cross the street with imperfect information about whether you'll get hit by a car, but you look, right, to check if there's any danger ahead. And so I think on the product side, we're all trying to make decisions about what's best for users and what's best for the business. But we really need more information about how to do that. And I saw a lot of people speaking this morning about the need for metrics. And I think that's a call for, I have important decisions to make, and I'm struggling to make them with the amount of information that I currently have.
I'm not so sure that the
I thought you would
users'
disagree.
end goals are what they're thinking about when they're deciding product decisions. It tends to be more bottom line than that. And that's how we end up with the situation we're in with the mobile web, where every page is big and bloated and full of hundreds of tracking scripts. And it was frankly depressing to hear today about everyone we want to get our analytics. We want to be able to know when people swipe or tap or scroll.
But how do you decide whether to let them swipe or tap or scroll if you don't have analytics?
Let them swipe or scroll.
It's an experience, right? Like you choose the
Just
experience.
good old-fashioned user testing, right? I mean, do we really?
Well, but you have user testing, which is qualitative and quantitative, and I mean, ideally companies do both because one is much more expensive than the other.
Exactly. There's a nice middle ground there somewhere, and it's not. Let's track every single possible gesture that the user makes on every pixel of every screen, which is how we ended up with the mess that AMP is trying to solve, which is that you load up a URL in a web browser and it's full of nasty
No,
scripts.
we ended up with the mess where we are because the W3C did not implement things like carousels and tabs and other things that are on like every website in the known damn universe, and yet they haven't become actual in-browser components yet.
Look,
why?
If AMP didn't even have the web components part and you had to make your own, it was just using image and video and audio, it would still be so much faster because of the other part of it, which is the ban on scripts. That's what makes AMP fast.
But the ban on scripts couldn't exist without the components to do the things the scripts would be
Yeah.
doing.
Some of it, sure. But you know what? Even if we just use regular old-fashioned images and, you know, videos and audio, AMP would still be super fast. Because that ban on scripts, you're right? For years we're telling developers, you know, oh, performance is important. Like, developers know. They're not the ones, you know, choosing to put this crap on the web pages. It's the business people, the marketing
But
people.
I would actually say, I
They're not evil. I did change a little bit.
mean, to be fair, I would actually say that companies like BuzzFeed and Etsy have a real need to measure a lot of the users' interactions to actually fine-tune. But maybe we don't need to do it with 5 different analytics scripts at the same time.
That's fair. But
What do you
there's a
think?
new
But we
shiny
don't
one.
either. I mean, we don't do it with 5 different analytics scripts.
Yes.
You know, if you're a company at BuzzFeed's level of maturity, you're inevitably going to have your own in-house analytics solution. And so, I mean, this is actually sort of the way that we feel about AMP, I would say, as an organization right now. Principles that we agree with, a strategy that we agree with, but a lot of the work overlaps with the work that we are obligated to do even without AMP. So we do feel like probably we would get more out of it if we were less advanced as an engineering organization.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I wasn't always at Etsy. I've been in the content publishing world as well, and I see both immature and mature companies having a lot of trouble with performance. Like at the small end, you may not have the expertise to do something as optimized as like the worst AMP page. And at the big end, you have so many different people that inevitably the worst, like the weakest link is going to drag down the performance of the site. So it feels like in my experience, like companies at all different levels of the spectrum have a really hard time delivering a consistent mobile experience that the user can like expect to be good. And so you know, I can appreciate that that's a big problem that AMP has made real gains on. You know, that said, like the solutions that have like worked really well for content publishing don't necessarily work for the rest of the industries. And so it'll be interesting to see, you know, I was very interested in the talks earlier today about the other industries, but it seems like the solutions that are being provided might need to grow or adapt or...
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and Gina, probably you know a lot about. I mean, you've built solutions around converting from HTML to AMP HTML, and
That's
so
right.
you have probably learned a lot of why people actually are motivated to use AMP in the first place.
Well, in my experience, people are motivated to use AMP. I'm seeing this from our clients at Postlight because of SEO. I mean, they want it in that top stories carousel. They want the lightning bolt of approval in their, in regular search results, which is happening now. And that, that concerns me. I'd rather that the concern for them was about performance and better user experience, but it's about search SEO and search ranking. How many publishers would use AMP if that weren't a factor?
Right. And
Fewer.
I mean, it's you're right.
Fewer.
And it's kind of interesting, right? I mean, sometimes I say, someone can do the wrong thing for the right reasons, but maybe they're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons.
The right thing for the wrong. But,
I
but this
agree
is
with
the
that.
Oh, that's
I mean,
a stretch.
so the lightning bolt. Well, I think we all agree that AMP is a great user experience, a much better user experience. And the lightning bolt as a user certainly represents to me, something that's gonna show up right away. But hearing you say that the lightning bolt is a symbol of Google, verifying and validating and hosting this page, like that's scary to me as someone who cares about kind of the open web, right? If you talk about the open web, you're talking about standards-based and decentralized and where content isn't privileged, right? And AMP does all those things, right? Like it's not a W3C standard yet.
True.
It's not decentralized because at least all AMP pages are hosted on Google's cache. So if you search Twitter for google.com/AMP, there's lots of results there. People are sharing that URL. So it's not decentralized. And what was the other one? Oh, and content isn't privileged. I know I'm sort of conflating net neutrality here a little bit, but AMP content is privileged in Google search results. And that concerns me. And I think that it concerns publishers. And I think that these are valid concerns. And here's the thing, like, no one on this panel or even in this room has thought about these problems as much as the AMP team at Google. So I don't necessarily have like a better solution, and AMP is a better solution from what we have, but I think it's important to understand why it could be perceived as scary and sinister and frightening to people who are considering whether or not to publish AMP.
Now, the good news is...
And if you think
sorry.
super long term, and you imagine a world where Google's no longer a company, it's difficult to think that so much of the world's content is on a set of URLs that could just not exist if one company didn't exist.
I mean, I just wanted to quickly mention, like, the good thing is that we now not just have one cache, but we actually have more caches coming up, and the first one that was publicly announced was Cloudflare's cache. So you'll actually learn more about it tomorrow. But
That's great. That's a step in the right direction.
the cache, and this is something that some people don't understand, is that as a publisher, you don't choose the cache. You choose the cache as a platform. So as a platform, you make a decision. Let's say you're Bing, right? You make the decision whether you want to use Cloudflare's cache, you want to use Google's cache, you want to use your own cache. And so it's up to the platform to make that decision. But now you could say, okay, now all my content is still mirrored on those caches. How the question really is, are there any better ways to do this?
Well,
To do with the cache side of things? Or?
Yeah, let's talk about the cache for a second.
I guess I would say that I think a lot of it's gone well, and to Google's credit. But I feel like there's a lot of unspecified policy, so there could be more clarity around policy, more fairness in that. Like, I don't understand, like, what is there? Maybe I don't even know. Is there policy around, like, that's stated, like who gets the badge, or when it would go away, or what happens if I don't like the decisions of? Let's forget that. But yeah, are there any stated policies around that?
Yes. Now there's two sets of two levels here. One is the AMP level, unrelated of any platform that's serving AMP like Google. So purely on the AMP level, we have released caching guidelines to actually pretty in detail to make sure that those guidelines actually, that people follow those guidelines, people implementing caches, and otherwise we won't endorse them as team. And they're fairly detailed. For instance, they say that you have to have a faithful visual representation of the content. Now, you couldn't just sneak in ads and then get away with it as a platform that serves the cache. That just wouldn't fly.
So are you badging content that's hosted on other CDNs?
You mean on the Google side?
Yeah, in the Google search results.
No. So Google is using the Google cache.
Gotcha.
And so now the badge really is not tied to the cache. Now, of course, in our case, we think it's a stronger guarantee. A guarantee is maybe a hard word, but a stronger signal that what you see is what you get. But because if you wouldn't have the cache, right, then, and there are some companies that publish without the cache, serve AMP caches in their index, AMP pages in their index without a cache. But then, of course, you have to trust the publisher to never do invalid AMP in the first place.
So Google's only going to give the lightning bolt to content that's hosted on Google's cache, not any other not any other caches that
Correct.
come out?
That is very interesting, given the long kind of history of Google actually doing research on basically sites that are not hosted by Google and giving users of Google search some information and some validation of them. Historically, Google doesn't feel the need to host a site to give it the green check mark of, this is a safe site.
Or the mobile-friendly symbol we were getting before, right? Another example.
Yeah.
Or there's a lot of trust involved in giving a site a high rank that Google's view of it will be the same as the end user's view.
I mean, this is a topic that was discussed a lot. I'm not going to go too much into detail because I'm trying to represent the AMP team more than Google. But AMP does not influence ranking. So yes, you're right that it has
Yeah, but the carousel.
Yes, fair enough, right? So you could argue that it has a great position on the search page if you can be in that carousel. But the carousel is a specific type of content. It's just for newsworthy content. That's why it's called Top Stories Carousel. It's very selective vertical, I would say.
I guess my point is that there's a history of Google trusting third parties to like they analyze and they rank based on their perception of these sites, like mobile friendly, malicious content, quality content, and then it presents it. It doesn't actually proxy all of those requests.
That's a good point.
It has a long history of trusting the rest of the web, and so it seems like maybe there's room for that in the AMP ecosystem as well.
I think ultimately, I mean, you're making a great point that AMP is a symbol of trust, and it is increasingly going to be a symbol of trust, as more and more content is mobile. But if you're a sort of both a publisher and a platform, like BuzzFeed is, and if you're kind of a platform like Etsy is, sort of substituting your own brand's trust for another brand's trust is not something that we are necessarily going to want to do, right? Very naturally, we want BuzzFeed to be a trustworthy name for people to click on links for. And so it may be to our benefit to try to work solely on, kind of BuzzFeed.com pages and not invest in AMP if it's going to wind up being increasing the trust of AMP as a platform rather than increasing the trust of BuzzFeed as a platform. It's just a matter of alignment of incentives.
That's a fair point.
Actually, Paul, did you get any pushback from security people at Google saying, you've spent all these years educating people to always check that URL bar to make sure it's actually the site that you think you're on, and now that URL bar says Google?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. But I mean, there's been concerns from various external folks. But it's a fair point. I mean, you're right that not having the URL in there is, well, it's in the whole link, but it's not the top level domain. That is also a sign of trust in the browser, and we're kind of breaking it. Now, there are very good reasons for why we're doing it, but it's kind of unfortunate, I would say. For instance, so just a quick explainer, but if you come from a search result page and then you click on an AMP result, it opens inline in a viewer. The reason why it's opening inline in a viewer is because that's the only way to achieve pre-rendering in the way that AMP does to actually just pre-render the first viewport. So we have to initialize an iframe, pre-render the first viewport, and that's why we just cannot navigate to the next page.
But the anecdata I've collected from users, people, friends of mine, who've clicked on those search results, is that mental model, it seems at odds. Like I'm on a search results page, I click a search result, I expect to go to another place. And that feeling when you notice, oh wait, I'm still technically on Google, I'm still technically in the results, it violates the principle of least surprise, I think.
It would be great if you could use the history API to replace the top level domain, but you can't.
There'd be no security implications at all. But,
no, not at all. But, so that's one of the big reasons why, well, the big reason why we're in this scenario. The question is, could we do anything? Do you have any ideas? And this goes to any of you, how we could do this in a standards-driven way. How we could actually solve this with an actual navigation.
Don't you guys have a relatively recent solution of having like a little UI element for the actual link at the top of the AMP page? I could swear I've seen that lately on AMP.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that, given that, so obviously having the URL that you're on be pointing to the actual piece of content is an extremely important web principle. But AMP is also trying to push a bunch of other really important web principles, and I guess it's not surprising to me that that's the one that fell behind. But I think the solution to it is more transparency, is making it obvious to users, especially not technically adept users, where exactly they are and what exactly is happening to them. I don't see it as necessarily a purely bad thing as long as it's well messaged.
maybe it should actually look more like you're still in the search results and less like you've left the search results, right?
Except I found having content without the subtle details that, you know, the different publishing houses have fonts that only they use. And when I read something in that font, I actually associate that with the brand, and it changes my feelings about the content that I'm reading. And so I think being more divorced from that would actually do more damage on the brand side of what we were talking about before, where we really want to have that trust be in the
You get that
brands,
with AMP.
not
I mean,
in
you
Google
can use whatever
directly.
fonts you want with AMP, right?
Yeah.
Which surprised me, seeing as the whole performance thing. Like that felt like
So
a pretty
fonts,
big gaping hole.
fonts, I would say, is probably the one thing where we had to give in. But we have mitigated it. We have done a lot of optimization around fonts. We have a font component that times out very quickly, and it's the only request that really has to be made in order to lay out the rest of the page. That's the one exception, sadly.
I mean, and it would be great if the rest of the web worked like that, right? And slowly but surely, we're getting there. And it's what worries me about AMP is like, the attitude was, like you said, I feel for you, like for years, you've been saying performance, performance, performance. And you talk to developers, actually developers understand, it's fine. It's like, okay, our existing website is this, you know, dumpster fire of scripts and bloated images and things. What do we do? Do we go and fix it? It's like, no, we'll create this completely separate thing over here that'll be really fast. And so I'm kind of in two minds about AMP, whether it's like showing the way. It's like, oh, look, it is possible to have a web page that's really fast. You just
That
have
was
to do
mobile
these things.
before, though. Remember,
Right,
before
too.
the business people realized that mobile was a thing they should be concerned with. Mobile was like lightning.
exactly.
I
Do
know,
what
I
you
can
want.
see both sides.
Okay. Right. So on the one hand, AMP could be like, look, it's an exemplar of how fast pages can be. So why don't you take all the lessons from AMP and apply it to your existing website? But what I see more and more is more people going like, oh, we've got our fast AMP pages, so let's just let the existing website burn. Like, let's just throw even more crap in there and make it even more bloated because we've got our fast AMP pages.
It's a fair
over
point,
here.
and we should probably talk about this. Yeah.
Well, I don't see that as a bad thing at all, though, if it does make web pages faster. I mean, I think if we've learned anything, it's that having a performant website that is meeting all of the business needs is real hard. And it shouldn't be so hard, but it is.
I'm not sure it is that hard because, I mean, AMP doesn't have any magic. It's basically a couple of rules and lay off the JavaScript.
Well, the magic, though, is that social pressure, is that the magic is people wanting to be in top articles. You know, and these are things that developers can bring back to their mean PMs who are making them put in all of those awful tracking scripts.
It's not me, it's the Google validator that says no.
Exactly.
So,
So I think you nailed it, but that's exactly it. That's the problem that AMP solves. It's a political problem.
it's more powerful than even your CEO, basically.
Yeah, put this crap on the web page. Can't. Google says we can't do that. That's really powerful.
Yeah, the SEO consultant tells my
that's
client
my favorite thing
that
about it,
they
yeah.
need AMP, and then AMP happens. Same.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you for being the bad cop.
Yeah.
you're very welcome.
I also think that for years there have been, I'm going to sound a little bit like back in my day right now, but for years people have been complaining about different aspects of the web. And so whether it's, you know, I can only have so many images, or before they worked I couldn't have rounded corners, or whatever it was, there was something that somebody wanted but they couldn't have. And I kind of think of those constraints as like a poet writing a haiku. Like, you don't complain that you didn't get one more syllable. It's part of the art. It's part of what's beautiful about what we do. And so I do like the way that AMP is basically like, here, this is what a haiku looks like in this particular case.
I agree. I think one of the best things about AMP is the constraints.
Yeah.
And again, that's why it's a little disconcerting today to hear about all these great new features that are coming that are basically loosening all the constraints and saying, yeah, you can have...
It's interesting to think if eventually that will end up basically...
Yeah, we'll just go back to having big bloated AMP pages.
Well, we still have some pretty hard rules that I don't think will.
We're teasing.
Yeah, I get it. But yeah, for instance, I mean, and this is actually interesting because there's and this is, I think we might be able to document this better in the future. But the founding ideas of AMP, you know, to me are really interesting. For instance, you know, Malte has this pet peeve of him that he just hates when a content loads. He was reading a paragraph and then an ad loads in front of it and just pushes everything down. And so this is a rule that I don't think will ever break, as far as I can tell. So yes, we might introduce more dynamic elements to be able to do, hey, toggle this image here. But but I don't think we'll ever break the founding principles.
That's something that's getting fixed in browsers too, right? There's some new
Yeah.
CSS thing that's
True,
getting
yeah,
How much
scroll
are you
anchoring.
pushing the Chrome team to
Yes.
start making these things integral? to
And that's
Chrome-
actually a good point,
Chrome
right?
work?
And we already have a thread with the Chrome team where we try to bounce ideas off each other. But ironically, both open source projects, yes, both with lots of Googlers. But
But if you look at all the I mean, obviously this is my bias towards CSS component libraries, but if you, and JavaScript component libraries, but if you look at them, you can see what we need, right? We've been expressing those needs for a decade now, and it would be really awesome if those things existed in browsers directly so that all we were doing is configuring them similarly to writing CSS rather than actually writing a carousel or a
I absolutely agree.
Tabs.
That's actually a good point. And I see two sides to AMP. One side is the actual format innovation, what we call it, which is creating web components and semantics around web components. Let's say, how should an accordion look like semantically as a web component? So that's one specific task. And then there's another task, which is let's build a JavaScript implementation on top that actually drives the UI of the component and makes it work. So those two, they're kind of intertwined right now because the same teams are working on most of the things. But I wonder, do we need an isolated format innovation push on the web?
an isolated what?
Format innovation push. So basically, do we need to work together to come up with new high-level web components?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
Next question.
Poster
Yes.
now, right, for the whole extensible web theory, right? That you'll create what you need to solve your problems, in isolation, and then if enough people use them, that will find its way back into the standards, right? That's the theory. But what's the victory condition for you for AMP? If in a few years' time we got blazingly fast web pages, but they're all AMP pages, and regular HTML pages are still big and bloated and slow, and nobody goes to them
Well,
anymore. Is
I
that a
think-
victory?
I don't think so at all. I mean, but this is my personal opinion. I have opinion like many other people working on AMP, I guess. But my personal opinion, and this was my time back in jQuery and jQuery as well. Our goal was always to not ever need jQuery again. That was always our goal to essentially have browsers become good enough so that we can replace it, actually remove it, evolve it into web standards. Now, of course,
And hardly anyone uses jQuery now.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I was being sarcastic, but maybe I'm just out of date.
Well, no, I mean, there's a lot of less people that use jQuery. jQuery, I guess, is still pretty strong. jQuery, I think, had its time and is now being replaced by a lot of more mobile-friendly solutions. So I'm not sure. It's been my baby, but I'm not sad to see it go because there's better things.
So is the ultimate end goal of AMP to make itself redundant so that nobody would need to use AMP
I would
anymore?
say that's my goal. And every time you mention something like we're going to remove or replace AMP, right? The people who invest their career in AMP might have strong emotions about it. So it's in every open source project and every project in general, this is a hard topic to talk about. But I do think that the long-term vision will be to have a lot of the driving technology in AMP be standards.
I think it's really great that AMP has demonstrated what the mobile web can be.
Yeah.
If you focus on a constrained set of capabilities, you can take the browsers we have today and demonstrate what a great mobile web can be. At least great in some dimensions, at least great in terms of performance and experience. So I share this concern that how do we push this beyond AMP and get, a developer I work with was talking about, okay, what if we implement AMP and it's obviously great, and then that means we have to rewrite the rest of the site, right? So I hope the might of Google can help push this back into browsers, push this back into more durable standards and things like that.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I mean, I think about this every night, and I'm having constant nightmares just thinking about how to work with the WCC to create create systems like the static layouting system in AMP. That's just so foreign to the world of CSS that I don't know. What do you think? Do you think there's a path to do some of those things?
Well, it's going to be slow, right? Because that's the way standards work. It's slow, and we need something now. So AMP is here now. Let's use AMP. But I do worry that it's almost like a cop-out. Like, our website's really slow. I will just use AMP and spend our effort there. And like I said, the theory would be, and that will then find its way back into our regular pages. But the practice is you got entire teams working on AMP stuff. And we've seen presentations today from people saying all the work that they've put into the AMP, like, that's great, but could you imagine if you'd put that same amount of work into your regular HTML pages? We saw some examples today of, things influencing and finding a way back, which is good. But I'd like to see more of that rather than, our website's a done deal. It's beyond saving, so we're just going to
I've seen it go
concentrate.
the other way, though. When I was consulting with Facebook back in 2008, and there were all the spinners all the time, and it was almost unusable, they started an initiative called Facebook Lite, which was meant to be sort of mobile Facebook, and it was really fast and really snappy, and it lit a fire under the folks doing the regular website. And in 6 months, they actually went from, I can't even remember, but terrible performance times down to a couple second page load for a full interactive app. So I don't know, I think sometimes it can work.
It would be
either way.
great. I would love it if that was the case.
I want to believe.
I too, glass half full, glass half empty, right? I know, please.
I mean, look, even in that worst case scenario where they can't get it together as an organization to parallel the work that they're doing with AMP on their own website, at least then there are some fast pages. And at least then, some thought about web standards did have to happen for whatever they were doing to get turned into the AMP format. I really see AMP's greatest values as first like a political constraint and an educational tool. Because even if those, say, a developer who can't get anything done with organizational constraints to make their site faster, to make it better, at least they have an example of progressive web enhancement. At least they have an example of a good caching strategy. It does make it, I think, it's an accessibility tool for a performant web, and a performant web has been quite a hard thing to do. If I only had a WordPress website and I had very little web development knowledge, that AMP WordPress plugin is a massive tool, and it isn't just a tool in the sense that I can turn it off and on. It's a tool in the sense that I can continue to learn from it. I can try to duplicate it. I think that can only be a great thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's great that AMP can be seen as like, this is what we're aiming for. This is what our regular site could be. But it does feel like...
me as kind of the other side of the coin of like the tools like Web Page Test or YSlow or any of those ones where they're like, let us show you what you were doing wrong. And people are like, oh, cool, now that I know, I can work on it. But AMP kind of goes a little further and says, and here's how you could actually
it's what you're aiming
better.
for.
Plus, the constraints it places on content are actually really great. So much of what we do on the web is just serving up a couple of p tags and a couple of image tags. Like a couple of p tags and a couple of image tags and all this for that.
And we heard that this morning. Somebody said, it's actually amazing what you can do without JavaScript. Like, yeah, right?
Oh my God, preach, but
That's going on somebody's tombstone.
yeah.
Just a couple images and a couple.
It does feel like we're kind of tackling the symptoms rather than the cause. If the cause is that you've got these developers, hardworking developers who care about performance, but they're in organizations where they're being told to add more crap to the page, and they try to argue, but politically they're in a bad situation. And so AMP helps that situation. It helps tackle that symptom. But is the real problem
desktop sites that are slow.
That's a fair point.
PageSpeed Insights tool. Like if there was immediate feedback to the marketing people that after we added the script, like we got deranked or that there was some sort of, I don't know, it's not the lightning bolt, but something else,
Yeah.
like that would be have the same effect as AMP without requiring a whole different format.
So I would actually love that. So I don't know if you're surprised to hear that, but
We have consensus.
I would love that. It's also really, really hard because to have the confidence that a page is slow or fast, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
PageSpeed Insights, sure, is a tool to give you the first set of recommendations, basic recommendations of what not to do, but it still doesn't tell you that a page is guaranteed slow or fast.
Yeah.
Or, for instance, how long does it take to render itself interactive?
It could be just an agreement, though, not to have scripts. Like, that alone would be...
Didn't Tim Cadillac have some proposal like this, where like a kind of almost like a content security policy, but a content best practice?
Yeah, it's now called feature policy, I think.
I would have thought, though, that the search team was already incorporating kind of pages are not promoted in search. But I would have thought that if you had a page that had all the same performance principles as AMP, that page would probably get some lift from SEO just by virtue of those efforts that were going into it.
Yeah, I thought
because
speed
the search,
was a factor.
right? 'Cause the
Yeah,
search
is
team-
speed not a factor? And
Page
Regular
speed,
search?
I think so.
talked about it a few years ago.
I'm not exactly sure, but I think so. This is not a topic that I usually work on.
that's
Totally.
that's fine.
We believe
yeah.
you.
Yeah, but page speed, again, page speed doesn't go far enough. I want to be able to say, okay, this page loads and displays what's useful to the user in, I don't know, 3 seconds. I have not seen anyone solve that problem. There's tools, there's some in-house tools that we're building, like Lighthouse, that try to do some of it, but it's really, really difficult.
So you're saying that you can't guarantee that kind of speed from any server that Google doesn't control?
How do
or
you do
have
it without a
insight
constrained
into its
framework? For
response?
instance, how do you know, let's say you want to know if first viewport is available and interactive, right? Because that's usually what counts to the user. How do you know what the things are that have to be interactive or the things that need to be painted? For instance, there's a huge ad, but then the rest of it is actually important. Those are real hard
The
problems.
Googlebot knows all.
Hey, you're smart people. You can figure this out.
That would be fantastic.
How does it not know? No.
But yeah, I don't know. There's a beauty
I
and
think
danger
it's
of
the
JavaScript and
difference.
CSS, right?
It's not about knowing. It's I think Sarah brought it up earlier. It's a trust agreement, right? It's saying we're agreeing to do this thing, we're agreeing to trust you to do that thing, and occasionally verifying that trust. But I don't think it's about enforcing so much as it is about establishing the SLA or the agreement that you have with the content provider. If you were
Yeah.
going to do it.
Well, trust can be,
There's trust between Google and a publisher, and there's trust between the end user and
And Google.
whatever's on the other side of the glass.
right.
Yeah.
Now, of course, my guess is that there's always an implicit effect on, and this is, that performance actually drives numbers. And so, of course, if you have a very fast website, then just organically, that web page will be used by more people and will probably have a better effect, even in terms
But
of
it won't be in
ranking.
that carousel.
Sorry?
But it won't be in the
It
carousel.
won't be in the carousel.
No carrot for you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, we keep saying that
a little
AMP doesn't affect search results, and I don't know if everyone understands that. I mean, I think the carousel, I think
Yeah.
legitimately and rightfully, people see that as affecting your search ranking.
Right. Again, a big point of contention, because again, you could argue that yes, it's very visible on the page,
It's at the top. It gives you like Tinder-like.
but then we have knowledge cards. We have knowledge cards for all sorts of things. If you're searching for something that can produce a knowledge card that produces, you search for Apple and then you get the Wikipedia knowledge card for Apple. We're also, this is another specific format that is trying to help the user get informed. And you could also argue, well, why does that Wikipedia page rank higher than the rest of the blue links below?
I'm still trying to get at what the secret sauce is with AMP, because with this issue of how can you measure whether a web page is fast. When I'm looking at search results and one of them has the little lightning bolt when I hit it and it opens up super fast, is that because of the format AMP and those web components, or is it because of the caching? And if I have an existing web page that's already fast, can I
It's
take
too
advantage
fast to
of
be the
caching?
format. You can't get that kind of data back that quickly.
So it's the caching is the secret sauce?
It's both, but even if you wouldn't have the cache thing, then the static layouting system, first of all, guarantees that you can render the page without any assets loaded, which is huge. Imagine doing that, in a standards-driven way for all of the pages on the internet.
Except for the AMP asset.
Sorry?
You need the AMP asset,
Well,
do you not?
That one
yes,
script.
you need to use the AMP-specific tags, yes, the components.
And you need the AMP JavaScript.
Oh, that's right. Yes. You need the AMP.js library. That's true. So that's the one
Which is
thing.
one more JavaScript file than I'd want, really.
That's hopefully going to be cached.
Does Chrome keep the AMP JavaScript in the browser?
Well, it's just normal
Just
caching.
like a normal cache.
Yeah, it's just normal caching. But yeah, so you can lay out the entire page with just having the AMP.js library and the original HTML file. So you can render the content even if there's nothing else available. And then everything else cannot block the rendering of the page. So there's no way to do document write in the main document. There's no way to block the rendering of the page. And I think this is probably the biggest thing.
I mean, I think that I could be wrong, but can that work without the cache? I mean, you're
This
not gonna,
works without the cache,
right?
sure.
I mean, you can't have Google validating that, and so you don't have the same guarantee that the content that's coming from that third-party publisher truly is valid and within the constraints.
I mean,
but
what
you
if I-
can preload it, and you can do the same exact.
You cannot preload it
Not preload it.
because you have to, well, if you
Why?
trust the page,
Why not?
yes, you could preload it, if you trust the page.
Right. It's put. You're now Google is preloading other people's
But
content.
trusting the page should not do any cross-site scripting attacks on the main host.
But
Is,
you're putting it in an iframe, right? So there's at
yeah,
least that.
sure. There's, some of it is mitigated, but there's still some validation in place that checks for security.
I have to say, ultimately, AMP as a format is more appealing than AMP as a caching strategy, if we're going to make that distinction. For a publisher, again, publisher platform, but distribution really is part of our business strategy, and I can't ever see that changing. But a format that is a subset of HTML that you guys can do some kind of formal validation on, yeah, that is incredibly appealing. It is just much more appealing than giving up a measure of control over the only thing that we have, which is our content.
So nothing.
That's what I meant about the bait and switch, right? It felt like a bait and switch. You said, great thing about AMP is it's on your own website. Fantastic. Wait a minute, this isn't my own website. I'm still on Google.
Here's the cool thing: you can actually do this today. You can use just AMP, remove the lightning bolt from the HTML tag, which means that it is technically invalid AMP, but it will still render, or produce any kind of other invalid thing on the page.
I know, but right now we don't have any. That's not going to show up in search results or anything.
No, it will show up in the search results. It will
Just
just show
without-
up as a normal page.
Without, yeah.
No lightning bolt, yeah.
In my case, for instance, I have my blog, and my blog is running a custom version of the WordPress plugin that I hopefully will. So we talked about this earlier, but it's with one page. It's canonical AMP. It's just one website that happens to have some AMP going on, and not all of it is valid actually. So the leaf pages, the content pages, the blog posts themselves are valid AMP, but the overview pages are not, and I still get some benefit out of it, and they still get indexed on Google, but just without the lightning bolt.
So you're talking about how, the problem is that Google can't trust that a site will be performing. You just don't have that level of trust because it's not
To
measurable.
be fair, we haven't quite earned it, have we?
Well, I don't know. This proposal
I
is like
think
the
about
thing with,
adding Google Analytics to something, then adding Segment.io, then adding something.
Oh, I agree. But if I'm not doing any of those things, then trust me, right?
Yeah.
Like you can measure that. I can check how many scripts are on this page. Are they on this blacklist of horrible tracking scripts?
I
Right?
would love it if this all wound up with a bunch of websites not having any JavaScript on them. That would be really
a great
cool.
outcome.
But
be a great
it seems to me that Google saying that we can't trust all those sites claiming to be performant, and yet Google is expecting an awful lot of trust from us, right?
What are we
You want
expecting?
you want our entire websites, basically. You want to host
Okay,
them
fair
for
enough.
us now.
Can
on
we
your
talk?
CDN.
We've got 10 minutes left. And this is about
Yeah.
the open web, and we're talking about trust. Can we talk about governance over
Sure,
AMP? So
yeah.
it's an open source project with lots of contributors, some of whom are here. But it's not a W3C standard. And
true.
the governance document, Google's the only company mentioned, right? And Google
The buck
determines
stops with Google, that's what
core
they're-
committers. So let's talk about that a little bit. Are there plans? Is that changing? Is that what are the kind of the internal thoughts
I mean-
there? Not very many.
Do you want to become a core contributor? I mean,
Will you bless me right now?
we'd love to have you. No, really, I'm not even kidding. The lack of non-Googlers in the core AMP team is not by design.
So are you saying that's just lack of interest, or
So we're doing a conference, as you might have seen today, to actually grow the community and invite more people to the AMP project and actually contribute, because we want to do that. We're very much interested in creating a more healthy governance model and contribution model, frankly, with lots of participating companies. Like, with Chromium. Chromium, since long ago, is not just governed by Google. There's just a lot of companies contributing to Chromium, and we'll try harder. So this is my promise to you. We'll try harder in the next month and years to invite people to the project. I mean, we started out in very rapid iteration, and so a lot of the processes were internal by, for the lack of trying maybe, but also because it made us a lot faster. But we just actually a few weeks ago started to open all the format reviews. So you can actually tune in every Wednesday and into the Hangout and actually participate in talking about the new components and making decisions about them. That's one thing. We opened that to the public. We created much more detailed instructions on how to become a core contributor, and we created this conference to drive the ecosystem of AMP and not Google. This is the important bit. We want to have AMP be a shared solution that a lot of people think we need, and not make it a one company thing.
I think the awkwardness, though, will come about from the perspective of a publisher and somebody relatively outside the project. The kind of ideal universe for AMP is that AMP is an accepted format under like the W3C, and that there are different companies that provide AMP hosting and that all contribute to the project and that compete. And obviously, from Google's perspective, that might be a little bit uncomfortable, but we would love to see that happen.
No, I think that's
and we
fantastic.
Think that Google could.
I think that would be fantastic, because
All right, we're all on
that's
the
the
same
only
page.
way, in my opinion, to make it healthy in the long term. There's just no other way to do it. And that's, I certainly believe that there might be situations where AMP is trying to go a different direction than Google, but that's a good thing. It's a good thing if more than one company governs the project and is trying to do a compromise that works for more than one company, right? And so far we've been trying to make those decisions the best we could, but it's much easier if you have other companies on board.
So are you setting up some kind of advisory board that includes the large content contributors or something like that?
Sorry?
Do you plan to have some kind of advisory board or something that includes?
I can't speak about the details. I think you would have to ask Malte.
We did have like a shadowy cabal before AMP was made public, right? There was like secret behind closed doors. Well, it was, because this
Are you trying to
open,
make it all sound
this
more
No, it
open
dramatic?
source project that suddenly landed one day with a marketing site and had already had a bunch of publications.
That's not completely
on
true. I
board.
mean, this was before my time, first of all, but it did start as part of the Digital News Initiative, and there was actually a few founding members on board, including WordPress, that knew about the project very early on, that participated in creating it. Now, who wrote most of the code? Yes, a bunch of Googlers. But the project was not started in a silo at Google.
And who decided who made that list? Who decided who got invited into that initial?
I don't know.
Never know.
I think seeing another major use case for AMP in addition to mobile search results in Google also would be tremendous for adoption and for the community and for a sense of like, this is a collaborative, cooperative effort versus the carrot and the stick,
I did like to see this morning Lo's presentation and how she talked about some of the limitations that she'd run into and then sort of responsiveness on the Google side to those limitations. But I think we need that same kind of responsiveness to people you were working directly with to build a site for you with the rest of the community. So I think the more you can aim for that, the better off we'll all be.
It's a good point. And by the way, I initially thought that once we achieve certain milestones, that more developers would actually offer constructive and destructive feedback.
Again, I think you're running into an issue where if a company has the development resources to contribute to AMP in a really significant, helpful way, then chances are still good right now that they're going to pour those development resources back into their own projects and platforms.
And rightly so. I mean, that's a good place to spend your time and money.
I mean, again, AMP I think is so much a Google project still at this point, and it has to be in somebody else's well-defined business interests to make AMP a priority.
That's true, yeah. But if you're implementing AMP and betting everything on AMP, then my guess is that is a priority.
Ooh,
Right.
I don't like the sound of betting everything on AMP. I mean, surely, I'd quite like it if at events like this was like AMP and other solutions are also available. It's not just like, oh, you want a fast website? It's got to be AMP. There's no other way. It's impossible to make fast websites other than AMP.
No, I mean, that was never the message, to be fair.
Right.
And you're right.
Paul wouldn't make that message.
I know, you wouldn't make that, but there's a danger that that's the messaging that's coming across.
You can absolutely make fast websites without AMP. That's clear.
You just can't trust them.
I can't trust them. Yeah. I can't trust them to be fast. And this is, by the way, this is our own failure, right? This is, in some sense, this is our own failure to produce the right tools to be able to correctly measure and trust them.
Yeah.
And so far, I mean, sure, I worked on DevTools before, and we have the timeline in DevTools. And it's just still, I mean, we iterated on it for years. It's still really, really difficult to use.
You mentioned Lighthouse. I mean, that's doing some good measurements. And,
Yes.
and in terms of trust, I mean, switching over to progressive web apps, which is separate from AMP, despite what you might hear, there is this element of trust, was if you fulfill these criteria, right? You're on HTTPS, you have a service worker, the user visits more than a few times over a certain space, then you get this at the home screen thing. That is actually showing some give and take, some trust on behalf of, well, Chrome in this case rather than Google Search, but still,
Yeah.
this idea that like, okay, I can't guarantee that this will be fast, but seems to fulfill some fuzzy requirements. Okay, I trust you.
It's a fair point. I think we can learn a lot from the progressive web app effort. But I think we're also on time. I think we need to wrap out. I thank you all a lot to be on this panel. If you liked it, give a round of applause. And if I can leave you with one, thought, is that I would love to have you all contribute to the project and make AMP your own. And this goes for everyone in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.